In this video, I'm going to show you how I carved my Notre Dame Football inspired gnome. So I started this carving with a block of basswood, and I roughly sketched out how I think the gnome will be standing. He'll have his hat, his arms kind of out to the side holding a football. I included my center line and some lines where the shoulders should start, where the shirt will end, and I extended those lines onto the side and to the back of the carving so I can keep a reference as I begin to rough it out. So the rough out process begins with me using my mallet and a number 9 gouge, and I'm just going over, following those lines that I drew on, trying to get the rough shape of the gnome. At this point, I'm starting to visualize what aspect of the carving is going to stick out the furthest. So I know that this gnome is going to be holding a football, so I'm really going to concentrate on making sure that I take away enough wood so that the ball will be sticking out furthest. The next thing I look for is to get that characteristic gnome hat. So I'm taking my time using my bigger chisels to kind of get that rough shape of the hat, and then I'll switch to carving by hand, use some small palm tools and my knife to refine the shape of the hat and start shaping the head. Next, I'm looking at what aspect of the face is going to be sticking out most. So I'm going to start with the nose. I'll use my small U-gouge, my knife, and I'll start finding that shape of the nose. I'll start carving some eye sockets, and I'm constantly checking it out, redrawing my center line, and putting in some other features of the face, such as the ears, which I'll eventually take down and recarve, but I'm just getting the rough idea and the layout of the carving. Sometimes it's good to take a little break from carving some of those details. So now I'm just going around, finding the shape of that shirt, going to the lower part of the body, finding the legs, and just kind of roughing it out more. It also makes it easier to hold while I go back to carving in my hand to get some of that bulk out of the wood. So next I started looking at the hands. Now before I said the ball will be sticking out the furthest, but technically the hands where the thumb and the finger are holding the ball, they're going to stick out just a bit further. So I'm taking my smallest tool that I have, this little micro U-gouge, and I'm finding the fingers and just tracing over where the hands will be. Eventually I'll go in and be able to round out the ball. So now I'm going back to the face, and I'm just trying to find where the cheeks are going to lay. I'm going in looking for little things I can fix up, rounding out the nose. I'll eventually find the beard line, and that'll help really make this guy come to life. You'll see him start to pop out pretty soon. At this point, I'm starting to figure out where his mouth is going to lie. And then he has that little mustache, so I want to clean that up a little bit. And I use my knife, it's nice and sharp, and I can just get a nice shape for the mustache. I'm drawing in the mouth lines. I'm just going to take a small U-gouge and trace a little smiley bottom lip. It's important to make sure that lip is sticking out just enough so when I start to carve the beard and shape the beard, I don't lose that bottom lip. So I definitely want it to be sticking out just a little bit. So now I'm taking my knife and I'm starting to shape this beard. I love carving in my hand because sometimes the grain changes a little bit, and you can turn the carving upside down or flip it just to make sure you can keep going with that grain. So I keep using my knife to shape the beard and start defining where the beard meets the shirt. I go behind the ball, and it really starts giving some more depth to the carving. Don't forget to keep stropping your knife and keep it nice and sharp. So now I start looking at his nose. I need to round the nose a little bit, and by accident I made it a little smaller than I wanted to, so that makes it a little challenging to find the nostrils, but using my knife I'm able to get in there and give him a nice nose. To carve out the eyes, I make sure I use my calipers to make sure they're even, and I'm just taking my gouges and my knife and refining that brow line and kind of bringing down the eye sockets a little bit. Before I carve the eyes, I want to set in the cheeks a little bit. I want him to have chubby cheeks and have the appearance that he's smiling, so those cheeks should be a little bit closer to the eye sockets. Next I kind of go in and clean up in those eye sockets. I use my files, some sandpaper, just to make sure I get all the little fuzzies and clean it up before I start putting the details in, so nothing chips. Next I go and take a break from the face for a little bit and really find those legs. I start to separate them. I go around, I find the feet, start shaping the shoes, and give myself some more room to get in there between the legs. To really get in there, I take my U-gouge and just slowly kind of chip away and make sure I separate the legs. The more wood I take away, the more I can refine the shoes and give some more detail. Now that all the features of the gnome are established, I go in with my Dremel tool and I just sand away some of the lines that I don't want in there anymore. Sometimes I'll use sandpaper to get this effect, but to be honest, it's just a little easier to use power and it saves some time. I do the same thing around the face, kind of refining that beard and the hands, especially around the fingers where it's really small. And as great as power is, nothing beats using a knife to get in there and chop out some of those little chips around the fingers. Now I'm using the really tiny bit to get in there in between the laces so they really stick out from the ball. Now that everything's cleaned up, I go in and start drawing in the lines for his beard and hair. I used a series of gouges and eventually a V-tool to give some shape to his beard. Once I'm happy with the beard and all the other details that I carved in, I go over with some fine sandpaper and get this guy ready for some paint. I find that when you do a logo, you have to get it perfect. So I printed off a Notre Dame logo and I used some carbon paper to trace it on. I start with some gold paint, watered down. This paint actually has some sparkle in it, which came out really cool, I thought, for the hat and the pants. Next, I tried to match that 1990s Notre Dame green. And I used a small detail brush to get in there for the ND logo. I used some brown for the football and some off-white for the laces on the ball. And I actually used the same white color for the eyeballs. For the soles of the shoes, I chose a Mars black. And I made sure the shoes were a little bit different color brown than the ball. For my skin tone, I made sure I gave him some rosy cheeks and lips, and really carefully tried to make the pupils of the eye. Next step was going in with some gray as kind of like a base color for the beard. I didn't want it to be pure white or gray, so I start with the gray as a darker color and eventually add in some white highlights. The last thing that I did was outline the ND with that same gold paint. And there he is, all finished. I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun carving this guy, and I'm looking forward to making my next video. If you haven't had a chance, make sure you like or subscribe.